Hello BookTube, hello friends, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and in this video I'd like to tell you about the books that I read in the month of November. I had a really good reading month. My numbers were a little smaller this month because I did complete some larger books. We had TomeTopple this month, hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. I also participated very loosely in the Buzzwordathon and also Nonfiction November. So I want to tell you about everything that I read during the month and then what challenges that each book met. Now I did do a mid-month November wrap-up, so I'll quickly go through those books, and if you want to know what I thought about each of the first 7 books, then you can refer back to that video. The first one that the first one I finished was on audio. In fact, I think all of these were audio except one. This was a nonfiction, The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. And then for a book club book, I finished The Reckoning by John Grisham. And then just because it finished a series for me, I listened to Four of a Kind by Gilbert Morris. This is a Christian mystery, not cozy, but Christian. And then I also read another inspirational book. This is a YA book. It's kind of an Amish book. It takes place in Amish country, but the main character's not Amish. Very good. It's made up of 5 short stories. This is volume 2 of Summerhill Secrets. And so this also finished a series for me. It's by Beverly Lewis, and I really, really enjoyed that one. I listened to the audio version on Hoopla. It's divided into 5 different books. Each of the volumes is divided into 5 books, so it took a total of 10 borrows on Hoopla for me to listen to the entire thing, which is a whole month of borrows, but it was very good. I'm glad that I did. And then I listened to 2 J.A. Jance books. One is book 4 in the Brandon Walker series and also book 22 in the J.P. Beaumont series. So it's a mashup of the 2 series. It's called Dance of the Bones, and this finished the Brandon Walker series for me. Then right after that, I listened to a short novella on Hoopla that was book 22.5 of the J.P. Beaumont series called Still Dead. It was a very good little short story, and I'm glad that it was on Hoopla. So even though I still have more J.P. Beaumont books left to read, that was the last one in my J.A. Jance stack on my Stackmas tree, so I can check that stack off the list and off my tree. And then the last one that I already told you about, I read in print. I read this to my daughter Emily. This is Circle of Grace by Leslie Gould, book 3 in the Home to Heather Creek series that's published by Guidepost. So let me go ahead and go through the rest of the books that I read, and then I'll go back and tell you what met each challenge for the various things and why I read them. So the next one is The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson. I can't really say a lot about this because this is book 3. It's the last book in the trilogy. So this is just a really good series. I'm so glad that I have finally gotten around to reading this last book. Katie really enjoyed the first book. She has not read books 2 or 3 yet, but now I'm excited because we have all 3 of them on our shelves. Hopefully one of these days Katie will get around to reading them too, so that I can chat about them with her. The first book was just so cleverly written because you've probably heard me talk about it before. It's called The Kiss of Deception, and it's written from 3 perspectives. One is a princess, one is a prince, and one is an assassin. And you don't know which one is the prince or the assassin. You don't know which is which all the way until the end of the book. It's so cleverly written, and I would highly recommend it. It's very light on the fantasy and just a really good trilogy altogether. The next book that I finished is called Chocolate Cream Pie Murder by Joanne Fluke. I had been wanting to read this ever since March because all of her books usually, with the exception of a few Christmas books throughout the years, most of the time they're released in late February. And every year I always think, okay, I can read that for March Mystery Madness, whatever the new one is, but I never get it ordered in time. So I'm happy to say that for next year's book, I've already got it. I'm already on the pre-pub list from my library. I think I'm 8th in line, so depending on how many copies there are, I should be able to be one of the early ones that gets a copy, and maybe I'll get to read the new one from March Mystery Madness. Meanwhile, though, this is the one that came out this past February, and I'm finally getting it done. I found it on Scribd. I recently decided to do a trial run of Scribd, and I'm going to keep it for a while and try to listen to several audiobooks that are available there, which haven't been available to me through any of my free library resources. So I'm really excited that I was able to listen to this. This one I think would be kind of a disappointment to die-hard cozy mystery fans, but I think people who enjoy this series will enjoy it. The reason that die-hard cozy mystery fans might have a problem with this is because the murder doesn't take place until about 80% into the book. Because the main story is not necessarily about the murder. It does certainly factor in. There is another mystery that Hannah is trying to work out and figure out and understand leading up to it, but the murder itself doesn't happen until much later in the book. So it's not your typical cozy mystery, but I think it is a really good addition to this series, and now I'm caught up with it at least until February, and I'm excited that I was able to find it on audio finally, because for some reason my library never got it on audio. Almost all of these are available through my library on audio CD, and I don't know why they decided to not get this one. So anyway, Chocolate Cream Pie Murder by Joanne Fluke. And if you haven't read any of this series, I would suggest starting with Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. And I would say after you've read the first 2 or 3, you could probably skip around until about book 14 or 15. Then some serious things start to change and happen. And I would read those in order. I wouldn't go past, say, 15 if you're still on the earlier books, because there's a good bit of different things that are happening in Hannah's life in the later books. I don't even remember now which number this is. It's 20 something. Another book I finished that I didn't particularly love, but it did finally finish a series for me, is Broken Throne by Victoria Aveyard. This is a compiled book of short stories that are part of the Red Queen series. A couple of them had been published previously, and there was at least one story that paralleled the Red Queen itself, and then one story at the end that was kind of an epilogue to the series. So it was interesting. It was fine. I didn't hate it, but I kind of started losing interest in the series by about the 3rd book. And then the 4th book I just listened to in October. It was called Warstorm, and it was so long that I just kind of got I just sort of felt like it was laborious to get through it. I was listening to it on audio CD. I didn't have access to the audio in a digital format so that I could speed it up, and so I just had to go with it. I listened to it in my car. This one, the same thing. I listened to it on audio CD in my car. It was not as long. It was 10 CDs, whereas Warstorm was 18 CDs. So it was okay. It didn't take me the whole month to finish this one, and I'm glad that I got it finished. But I would say that if you're not a huge fan of the series, that you could skip this one. But if you are a big fan of the series, then this definitely has some things that you might find interesting, and it is kind of an epilogue to the series. So if you're a diehard fan of the series, then you'll want to pick this up in order to feel like you got the complete story. The next book is a nonfiction book. I just had some extra hoopla borrows, and I decided to go ahead and listen to this because I was in the mood to do some cleaning. In fact, part of the reason that I kind of went off the grid for a couple of weeks around Thanksgiving time was because I was doing a lot of house cleaning. So while I was doing some work in the house, I listened to this on audio. It's called Cleaning House by K. Wills Wyma. And the subtitle says, it's a mom's 12-month experiment to rid her home of youth entitlement. So if you're a mom of teenagers, you can certainly understand youth entitlement, and I did get a lot of inspiration from this book. In fact, one of the first things that she suggested was something that I then in turn suggested to Katie, and she said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Let's do that. So I was excited that, you know, right off the bat, I was able to get one really good idea from this book. If you can hear that rattling, Emily has a cup of ice over here, and she's making noise. I just realized I didn't even have the light on in here. Of course, it's the middle of the day, it's high noon, and there's plenty of light coming in from the windows, but I usually at least have the light on because this old camera doesn't pick up as much light as my phone does, so maybe this will even things out a little bit. The next book I read in print, it's Ember Flame by Kaycee Browning. I started this in October for one of the readathons then, and it just took me a little bit longer to finish it. I thought this was very interesting. This is a fantasy story, and it was written by a girl who was in her early teens when she wrote it. She's 20 now, and she's the niece of a friend of mine here in Florida, although Kaycee herself lives in another state. I've never met her, but her aunt is a good friend of mine, and several years ago she told me about this book and that our local library had a copy of it, so I've been wanting to read it. I had checked it out a couple of times in previous years and just couldn't get to it. This year I was determined I was going to read it, and I'm so glad that I did. Now, I will say, you can tell that it's written by a teenager, but that's not a bad thing, because so many middle grade and YA books are written by adults trying to sound like teenagers. But this is written by a teenager, and it's more authentic that way. I really think it is. Now, you might be put off a little bit because of some of the juvenile aspects of it, the wordplay and some of the snarky remarks and things like that. But if you take it for what it is, I think it's very well done. And I hope that Kaycee has a bright future as a writer, because for her to have written something like this at such a young age, then I know she's got the creativity and the imagination to really take her writing to much higher levels. So anyway, I don't know if this is still available to purchase anywhere, if it's on Amazon or anything like that. But I am glad that my library got a copy of it when it was new, and that I finally got a chance to read it. Anyway, it's called Ember Flame by Kaycee Browning. And the sad thing is that in the back it says that coming in 2014 is going to be a sequel called Hail Frost. And Ember Flame and Hail Frost are both part of a group in this fantasy world called the Leverage. There are some that have powers with fire, and Ember is one of those, and there are some that have powers with ice, and Hail Frost is one of those. And it's just such a well thought out premise and fantasy world that I just thought it was really good, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to read it. Another book that I'm so excited to finish is Home Song by Thomas Kincade and Katherine Spencer. This is book 2 in the Cape Light series, which is a read-along I started last year and I'm so behind in. But listen, if you wanted to participate in this read-along with me, look how long it's taken me. If you have not even started the series and you want to read it, then by all means jump in. I think that this book was wonderful. I rated it 5 stars. The whole series so far is just really good community and family drama. There are tragedies, of course, but they're done in such a way that it's just a comfort to sit down and read one. You know, I picture sitting down in an easy chair by the fireplace and curling up with a cozy blanket and reading a book like this. Now, I don't have a fireplace here in Florida. I don't need one. But I do tend to curl up with a cozy blanket on a chilly night, or even if I've cranked the air conditioner up high. And it's just a pleasure to read these books. So I've started the 3rd one now. I'll tell you a little bit more about it whenever I finally do my December TBR and what I'm currently reading in December. But this I rated 5 stars. Now, I haven't really ever told you much about the books. The first book is called Cape Light, and this second book, Home Song, all take place in the town of Cape Light. It's somewhere in one of the New England states. I can't even remember now exactly which one, but it's a pleasant little town or village. And in this town, one of the main characters is Emily Warwick. She is the mayor. She is a single woman who was married and widowed at a young age. She was pregnant when her husband was killed and had the baby 2 months after he died, and her mother basically forced her to give it up for adoption if she was going to help her at all, because her mother had been against her wedding from the beginning. And so in order for Emily to come back home and have any help from her mother made her give it up for adoption. So at the beginning of Cape Light, we meet this child who's grown up and is now 20-something, who has come to Cape Light looking for her mother. So the reader knows that Emily is the mother and that Sarah is the daughter, but Emily doesn't know that Sarah is her daughter until much farther into this book. And so that is one of the storylines. Now, the mother who forced Emily to give up her daughter is a piece of work. She's not a bad person. She's just cantankerous. She has some health issues. She's got her own baggage, and you learn a little bit more about her as we go along. And then Emily has a sister, Jessica, who has a romance in the first book, and their mother is against that romance as well. So it goes from there, and then there are several other townspeople. There is the Reverend and his wife. One of their children is estranged from them, and we're still hoping that at some point that a relationship will resolve. They do have a daughter and a son-in-law that live there in Cape Light. And so there's just a lot of different families. There is the diner owners, and in the second book, the owner of the diner runs against Emily for mayor, and so there's that whole story and a lot of controversy that gets stirred up. So those are just some of the storylines in the series, and I would definitely recommend starting with Cape Light and then going on into Home Song, and then join me in the read along. I have some threads on my Goodreads group. They may be behind at this point. I don't even think I have gone on yet and talked about this book, but I will as soon as I can. And please do join me, and if you have read any of these before, then let's chat about them in the comments. Of course, most of the books in the series are Christmas themed books. I'm going to read them in order, although I was looking on Goodreads and it looks like a couple of the Christmas books might have been written first and then he built a series around it. So I don't know for sure. If you know, let me know. Or maybe it's just dated wrong on Goodreads. I'm not sure. Of course, I know a lot of times Goodreads will list things in chronological order rather than publication order. So maybe that's the situation there. But I'm going to go ahead and read them in the order that they're shown on Goodreads. And eventually, hopefully, I had really hoped that by this December, which is now, I would get to at least one of the Christmas books. The month isn't over yet. I might still, but anyway, I'm excited that I got this one done. The next book I'll have to show you a picture of. It's on the Audible Escape package. It's called Sheriff Bride Christmas, The Inside Man. I am trying to complete the Audible Escape category challenge, and I've got some threads on my Goodreads group for that. Sarah from Steeped in Books issued the challenge to everyone on her Goodreads group early in the year, and then somewhere about halfway through the year, she decided to abandon that challenge for a little while, so I kind of moved it over to my Goodreads group. But now she's talking about next year, so she may go ahead and pick it back up on her Goodreads group, which is fine, because I'm not really sure if any of you guys who follow me are actually doing it with me. A couple of you said that you were going to, but if you are, then jump in and comment about what you're reading. I did get behind on the threads on Goodreads, and I will go back and catch that up and let you know what I have read. But in the meanwhile, I listened to 2 categories for November. I listened to Frontier and Colonial. So for Frontier, I listened to Sheriff Bride Christmas, and it didn't look like when I initially picked it up that it was part of a series, but then in the introduction it does talk about 3 other books in the series or the collection, and it suggests that you read those first, but it also says that you don't have to. So I went ahead and listened to this one, and then I got to thinking that I probably would have gotten a little more appreciation of this one had I read the others, especially if there's some crossover of characters. I don't know, of course, having not read the first 3, but it did sound like that several of the characters had some backstory that she was just reviewing, and so it would have probably been better if I had started at the beginning, but I didn't, and it's okay. So it was a very short novella, like just under 2 hours, and the whole series, the whole collection, it looks like they are about female sheriffs. So it may just be about one female sheriff, or each one may be about a different female sheriff. I'm not really sure, but I love a good female sheriff story. So, you know, I did enjoy it for what it was worth, but it was so short that it was done before I really could figure out what was happening. So anyway, I'll probably go back and listen to all the rest of the series, and then I'll have a better idea of what's actually happening by the time I get back to this one. So then, the other one that I listened to for the Audible category challenge is one that I have listened to before. It's right in the middle of one of my favorite series by Janette Oke, and it's also co-authored by T. Davis Bunn, called The Birthright. I even already owned it on audio, but look, this is cassettes. And I got this at a library sale somewhere because I love this series so much, and I actually don't have physical copies of the print books. So I've got a large collection of Janette Oke books, but there's no more room on this shelf for this series, so I just haven't bothered to purchase it. But I do have now all 5 of the spin-off series, which is by Davis Bunn and his wife Isabella Bunn. So this will be a good refresher to get me back now to where I can start the next series this year. This is book 3. There's 5 in the series, and I think I have the other 2 on audio. For some reason, only books 3 and 4 are on the Audible Escape package, so I might go ahead and listen to book 4 again, and I think I have a physical audio copy of book 5. So somewhere in 2020 I might listen to that, and then I will be able to jump into the next series. So anyway, this is, I always get the names of the series mixed up. One of these series is called The Heirs of Acadia, and one is called The Song of Acadia. So this one is the one that's co-authored by Janette Oak, and it's really, really good. In the beginning, it's about these two women. The book takes place in Nova Scotia. So one woman is white, she's British, living in Canada, and the other woman is native, she's Acadian, and they become friends. I think the English woman teaches the other woman English, and eventually they both marry and have a daughter. And in the second book, the Acadian's daughter is very ill and medical care is not available to them. So the English woman trades daughters with her briefly so that she could take the other daughter to the doctor, and on that day, that is when the Acadians are crowded onto ships and shipped down to Louisiana. So they have basically switched daughters. So in this book, the daughters are grown. By now they have found out about each other. They know each other. There's a lot that happens leading up to this book, and I don't even want to tell you about this book because this is way past all of that. But it's just a fantastic series. I love it so much. And then, and by the way, if you're familiar with Janette Oak, you know that she is a Christian author. So these are definitely Christian books, and they're just really, really good. Two more books that I finished during the month. One is Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. I listened to this on audio. This also counted for TomeTopple. This is book 2 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. Just a really exciting, adventurous series. It's about ships that are made of wizard wood, so they are alive. And the title of this is very appropriate. There's actually 2 ships, and the title is really referring to one in particular, but really because of the other ship and what all it's been through, especially in the first book, this title could be talking about either one of them at this point. So this is just a really good book, a good page turner. They are all 3 available on Hoopla on audio, and I am just really glad that I am finally getting to the series. I am planning to go ahead and listen to the 3rd book, Ship of Destiny, in December, even though it's not a Christmas book. I want to get this done by the end of the year, and I just have been flying through these. I flew through the first one in 2 days because that's all the time I had left before it was going to expire on Hoopla. This one I got to about 80% and it did expire, and so I put it aside thinking I would just read the last 100 pages or so, and I tried to sit down with it, but I had so many other things I wanted to finish and I wanted to read. So then when the end of the month was getting close and I still had plenty of borrows left for November, I just decided to go ahead and borrow it again and finish it on audio so that I would be sure that I could get it finished by the end of the month. So it's a chunker, and I'm really glad that I finished it. And then the last one is really one of the best books that I read this month. This was from my TBR jar. It's nonfiction, although when I started reading it, I thought, well, this is fiction. Would this even count as nonfiction? But I looked it up, and our library catalog has it classified as philosophy, because basically this is a fictional story that is used to teach you how to live life to its fullest. It takes us through a series of events, starting with a man who is rushing to get to a meeting, and he is almost there and everything stops. Everything is frozen except him and this man in a clock shop. And this man introduces himself as the timekeeper, and he begins to take him through a series of events, 12 chimes, because at the beginning all the numbers fall off of his stopwatch. So he's got a blank stopwatch, and he has to go through these 12 tasks or series of events to learn something and earn back the numbers on his watch, so that by the time he gets to the end of it, he has had 12 really good lessons on living life to its fullest. And I just thought it was great. I really want Katie to read this. I didn't know when I picked this up at a library sale like a couple of years ago if it was going to be anything that I would be interested in. I'm so glad that I got it. Anyway, it's called Live 1,000 Years by Giovanni Lavira, and this can count as this counted as my Buzzwordathon book because the word 1,000 is a number, and the buzzword for last month was any number. Now, I did have one other book I started that was going to be my Buzzwordathon book, and this is also from my TBR jar. Thankfully, I got 2 books read from my TBR jar. I didn't finish this till December 2nd, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now because it had the number 12 in the title, and I started it and just couldn't get it done in time to say that it was, you know, counted for November. This was also a really wonderful book. It was delightful. It's called The 12 Teas of Christmas by Emily Barnes, and the artwork is really what stands out about this book. The illustrator is Susan Rios, and it is made up of beautiful, beautiful artwork regarding tea and tea parties and flowers and things like that. The text of the book are basically 12 ideas for tea-themed parties, one each month. So here we have January. Each month, each tea party has several pages of ideas for things to do. There are recipes for each month. There are ideas for things to make. A lot of it is kind of more along the lines of something Martha Stewart would do, but it's beautiful to think about. It's beautiful to read about. I doubt that I will ever do any of this, but it's a gorgeous book, and I'm so glad that I read it because I think this will be a lovely gift for someone who is a tea fan or a tea fanatic, and it's just a beautiful book to look at. Now, I might want to try a couple of the recipes. They sound really good, but the artwork is just gorgeous, and so I was glad that I finally got this read. So this is my first December book, but I wanted to go ahead and show it to you now because it's nonfiction, and I you know, I started it thinking it would be my Buzzwordathon book, but then I ended up realizing that this one also had a number in the title. Okay, so I started another book that I've had to carry over to the month that I really want to tell you about, but I've only been able to read about 15% of it because my Kindle is missing. So I want to just tell you the title of it, and then by the end of the month I hope that I have found my Kindle and I've been able to finish it. But it's a book by a friend of mine from my local book clubs. Her name is Rebecca Marie DeRoller, and she is a heart transplant recipient, and she has written her story. And just to know her, you would have no idea that she ever had any kind of physical issues like this. You would not know at all. I mean, she's the picture of health, and she's just an amazing person, and I'm really excited to read her story. She told us about it at book club a couple of years ago, and I had been kind of waiting for Nonfiction November so I could read it. So I finally purchased it, and I started it, and then Katie and I went to the library, I guess the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, and I checked out 3 books. I had one library book already in my bag that I had decided not to check in, and so I had it in my bag, and I had my Kindle, and then I checked out 3 other books. That bag has disappeared. I cannot find it. It's not in my car. I can't find it in my house. My daughter Emily has been filling up bags and carrying bags around. She may have just grabbed the bag and put it somewhere. I don't know. I am looking. I've been doing so much cleaning over the last few weeks. I've been going through stuff and everything that I can't imagine where it could be, because I mean, I'm cleaning out the corners in my house and getting a lot of organizing done. I'm also stacking up stuff in the garage for a garage sale. She may have added it to that stack, in which case I'll find it whenever I do unpack all of that to actually have a garage sale. I don't know. Anyway, I have faith that God will help me find them before I have to end up paying for the books, I hope. And if I don't, then so be it. But anyway, I have pulled up the Kindle app on my computer, so if nothing else, I can finish reading it on my computer. But I wanted you to see a picture of it so that I could just tell you about it. It's called Don't Put My Shoes Away, and she said the idea behind the title is that when she was in bed, you know, in the hospital, of course you can't wear shoes, but the idea is, you know, don't give up on me. Don't put my shoes away. I'm going to need those. And it's just such an amazing story. So I hope that you will check it out. as soon as I finish reading it, of course, I will tell you a little bit more about it. But already knowing the person behind the story, I think it's going to be fantastic. And I don't think it's a very long story. I think that it's less than 200 pages. It is available on ebook. You can get it for your Kindle, and I believe it's available in print on Amazon. So I finished 17 books. I carried over a total of 3 books. The one that I just told you about, and also the 12 Teas of Christmas, which I have finished, and then one other book which I have also finished in the month of December, which I'll tell you about later. It is A Land Remembered by Patrick Smith. This is a Florida historical fiction, and it's fantastic. I will definitely tell you more about it because I've been hearing for several years what a great book it is, and it took listening to it, reading it, for that to really sink in. It is really, really good. Every bit as good as Lonesome Dove, I think. And the reason I'm comparing it to Lonesome Dove is because the occupation of the main family is that they drive cattle across Florida. The 1800s, and they drive cattle across the state, sell them at a port in order to be shipped to Cuba, and that's their occupation. There's so much more to it than that. It's just a fantastic story. So anyway, that is everything I've finished. And now let me tell you just a little bit about my totals, the stats, what counted for what. I did mention a little bit of that, but just to kind of wrap everything up. Now, I did participate in Nonfiction November, and so there were 4 prompts: design, sport, true, and voice. So even though I didn't finish this in the month of November, I'm going to count this as design. The artwork in here is just amazing, so that is going to count for design. For sport, I'm going to stretch it just a little bit because I told you that the man in this story, Live 1,000 Years, had to go through a series of 12 different tasks or events, and some of those were sport related, so I'm going to go with that. And then the next prompt was true, so I'm going to plug this one in there because that whole thing about youth entitlement, that's a real thing, and I'm going to count this for that. And then the last one was voice, so I'm going to count The Stranger Beside Me by Ann Rule because this is Ann Rule's story about knowing Ted Bundy and working with him and what he was like, and so it's from her voice, and this was her first true crime book. So I think this is the perfect book to count for that prompt. Of course, Nonfiction November was created and is hosted by Olive from Abookolive, and it took place over the entire month of November. Then another readathon that I participated in loosely, and I say loosely because I never get my book completed during the actual week of the Buzzwordathon, but I always pick at least one book that fits the word and just keep working to get it read so that at some point I have finished at least one book that has that buzzword in it. So the Buzzwordathon is hosted by Lala from BooksandLala, and the buzzword this time was numbers, any number. So of course I read Live 1,000 Years by Giovanni Rivera, and then eventually finished The 12 Teas of Christmas by Emily Barnes and Susan Rios. And then the last readathon that I participated in was TomeTopple, which was created and hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. I actually finished 3 tomes this month, but The Stranger Beside Me, even though it's a tome, I finished it way before TomeTopple started, so technically this one doesn't count. But I had 2 other tomes that I at least started during the 2 weeks of TomeTopple. I think I finished The Beauty of Darkness within that 2-week period. Then I started Mad Ship, I believe, during that period, but I didn't finish it until after TomeTopple was over, and I didn't do any of the challenges per se, although this is an adult book and this book is part of a series, so I guess I really did do some of the challenges. I can't even remember now what all of the challenges were, and so I don't think that I met all the challenges. Now usually when I do TomeTopple, I'm all in, and I take those 2 weeks and I only read or listen to big books that are 500 pages or more. I have not ever done the November one before because I'm always doing so many other things. So since I had these 2 already on my TBR, they fit perfectly fine, but I didn't really set out to fully participate this time. Next one that comes around, if I can at all, I will spend that 2 weeks and I will just do big books, but it just didn't work out this time for me to do any others than this. So I want to also say thank you to all the hosts of these readathons. They are all really fun, and I'm thankful that we have readathons which help challenge us to read, at least me. Not everyone is challenged by readathons. I've heard some people say that they just don't like readathons because it feels like too much pressure. You know, I get that, but for me it does does give me that boost to get things done within a certain time frame, or at least soon thereafter. So I'm really thankful for Readathons because they do help me get some things read. So before I move on to my Stackmas tree, let me just read you my totals. So of the 17 that I finished, 4 were print books, 13 were audiobooks, 3 that I finished were nonfiction, and of course the 2 others that I started. And then 2 for TomeTopple, 2 from my TBR jar, which were nonfiction. And then, of course, there were my 2 for the Audible category challenge. The categories I did were Colonial and Frontier. Incidentally, for December, I am reading Amish and Victorian because I think that there are several choices of Christmas themed books for those categories. So if you'd like to join in with me and listen to something on Audible, on the Audible Escape package for either of those categories, then let me know on my Goodreads group or let me know in the comments below. Then for my Stackmas tree, I finished 7 more books that are actually on the tree. I did put examples of the other 10 down under the tree, but I did finish a total of 7 for the tree, and I'll go through those in just a second. So then the genres that I read, of course, 3 were nonfiction, 5 were mysteries, and of those 5, 1 was inspirational. And then there were a total of 6 inspirational books, including that 1 mystery, and then a total of 4 fantasy books. That's a lot more fantasy than I usually read in one given month, but it's because they were series that I was trying to finish on my Stackmas tree. So that's why I was heavy on the fantasy this time. So I don't know on my old camera if you can see this very well. Our printer's been giving us some issues, so the books that I have recently finished, I have not been able to make little thumbnail copies of the cover of the books. Hopefully I can get that fixed. It may just be that we need some ink, I don't know. But anyway, I did finish this stack, that's The Beauty of Darkness, and I finished the Red Queen stack by reading Broken Throne. And then I finished those 2 J.A. Jance books, so I finished that stack. I finally finished book 3 in the Home to Heather Creek series, so I have that one filled in now. And I finished Mad Ship, so I just have 1 more left to listen to in this stack. And incidentally, of all my stacks, this is my last audiobook. So the rest of these stacks are going to be a lot more challenging to finish. I have 4 books ongoing right now. I have not put the squares up yet because I wanted this to be indicative of what I finished in November. I've got them stuck back here on the back ready to go on the tree because what I've been doing is anything I'm currently reading, I like to put the blank square so that I can see what I'm currently reading, and then when I finish a book, then I put the book cover on the square. Or it's actually a rectangle, but anyway, the space. Let's call it a space. So I haven't put the blocks up yet of the ones that I've started reading in November because I wanted this to be indicative of what I've read up to the end of November. But as soon as I get done with this video, then I will stick up the 4 blocks that I'm currently reading, which there's 1 on this stack, 1 on this stack, and there's this one and this one. I want to continue to move forward all the stacks as best I can. And then if one stack grabs me, if one series really grabs me, then I might go ahead and just work to finish that stack so that I get as many stacks as I can finished. But all the stacks I have left are really good. It's just that I have to read them in print, and that goes a lot slower for me. So I'll definitely finish the last live ship book because that is my last audiobook. Okay, and then I finally finished Home Song by Thomas Kincade. I already had the thumbnail made for this one before the printer started acting up, so that's why I have the actual book cover of that one. So the 7 spots that I filled in are here. So this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So currently now, today, I'm filming this on December 7th, and I have started now this one, this one, this one, and this one. And so then the rest of what I read are all down here. So these are representative of all of the books that I've read in October and November that don't fit on the tree. So we'll see how far I get. I would love to be able to fill in the whole tree, but I know how slow I am with print reading. So we're just going to do what I can do. I might still go ahead and work on this in January. So we'll just see how far I get in December and see if I can finish decorating my tree. And so that's my Stackmas for the end of November. So we're 2/3 done with the 3 months that I gave myself for this challenge, and we'll just see how far I can get. So that's about it for my November wrap-up. I am having a good reading month so far. In December, I've been really trying to focus on books for my Stackmas tree, and also I'm reading some books for the Book One Cozies Club, some Christmas-themed cozy mysteries that I can get on Hoopla on audio, and I will tell you more about those when I do my December TBR, which hopefully will be very, very soon. So I guess that's about all I have for this video. That is everything that I read in the month of November. Let me know what you read in the month of November. Let me know what your favorites were, and if you read anything that you would recommend that you think I would enjoy, and let's chat about it all in the comments. So that's all for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.